We are left with Gunalunkwa, the great love from the ancestors. And with that, we go on to breathe and heal, to be strong like our ancestors, to keep a good mind.
First of all, we've got to open ourselves to listen to the truth. And we've got to accept the fact that the truth of our relationship from the First Peoples' point of view is a different story altogether. And there has to be healing. We must find ways to keep talking with one another, sharing with one another, and allowing healing to happen before there can ever be reconciliation.
There's a huge gap between what is experienced by settler communities and what is experienced by Indigenous people in terms of health, in terms of threat of violence, in terms of education levels, in terms of rates of incarceration. There's this gigantic gap.
This gap has to close. That's reconciliation. Because this gap represents everything we talk about. It represents the 80+ boil water advisories. It represents the 1,200 missing murdered Indigenous women and girls. It represents the 40,000 kids in care, First Nations children in foster care. It represents a disproportionate number of our people in jails. It represents our overcrowded housing, the 5 to 7 times the youth suicide rate. All these negative things, that's what this 6 versus 63rd gap represents.
If you think that Indigenous people are a problem to be solved like poor people are a problem to be solved, some people think, or anybody else who's experiencing oppression or a problem to be solved, then there's a possibility that you're paternalistic at best. And paternalism and racism are on the same continuum, right? It starts off, and this is the story of Canada, it starts off as good intentions.
There are people that say, why should Indians be any different? Why should we treat them in accordance with these treaties or these special constitutional rights? Why don't they just get on with it? You know, my ancestors came here from England or Scotland or France or the Caribbean, and yes, the first generation was hard, but we've made it better for ourselves. Why don't they just do that? Which ignores the fact that we're being held down from doing that. It's true that we can leave our reserves and go to the cities, but all these structures of terra nullius travel with us.
They've taken a lot from us. A lot of our stories, we were an oral people. You know, they've practically almost taken our language, and you know, I'm really trying to learn Blackfoot from my grandparents, but there's a lot of work that we as Indigenous people have to do to ensure that we don't completely lose everything that makes us Indigenous, that makes us Nisitipi, that makes us whatever nation you come from.
I work with kids all the time. I got young people from this community that I watched, you know, going down because of drugs and alcohol, and said, okay, stop. I want you to do something different. I want you to come with me. I'm going to go to this conference, or I'm going to go to this event, and I want you to come and I want you to listen. I want you to listen to what Marie Sinclair has to say about history. I want you to listen to what I have to say about, you know, our communities and the impact that has been there because of things that you know nothing about, but you're going to learn. And I've watched those kids be successful because now they know something they didn't know.
One teaching that I really like is that the heart, well, something that I've come to realize, is the heart has the capacity to collapse time. 20 years can go by after you've been hurt by a parent or an auntie, and boom, it collapses all that time. You feel the same way. So that speaks to the intelligence of the heart.
Indigenous communities have a lot of work to do as well to overcome their victimization. And so that entails healing, but it also entails overcoming anger.
As Indigenous people, we have to be the educators. We have to really profess the history as it happened and not try to cover it up anymore.
The doctrine of discovery has become an almost for some people it's almost an everyday language now, whereas before it was not. Nobody knew what it was, basically. And but nowadays there is some interest, some desire to know what it is about, even though it may not be favorable. But I think in order to have healing in our lives and reconciliation, we have to know what Doctor of Discovery, what it is,